Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Gold Silver Bitcoin Show, brought to you by the GoldSilverBitcoin.com store. Feel free to subscribe also with the button down below. We are more than honored to be sitting down today with Chris Verrico. He's the president, CEO, and director of Rio Silver. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Justin, for having me on. It's great to talk to you again.
Pleasure's all mine. So I want to really dig down deep today, so to speak. Especially as it relates to commodities. I think part of the reason why I have been speaking about commodities is that I predicted there to be what some have termed a super cycle. I don't know if that's such an accurate term in commodities generally, but just that these were treasures that one wanted to own. And I think we've seen the fundamentals for that argument become increasingly clear over the last 12 to 15 years since I've been following gold and silver in particular. So I want to speak with somebody who's been in this industry for a long time about what you've learned about the mining industry and also what you generally think about these precious metals from a more broad lens. But first, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today.
Well, yeah, thanks, Justin. It's fantastic. Yeah, no, yeah, I've got lots of thoughts on the model, but I think more recently, with the advent of COVID, on top of all this money printing and all that we all know has been going on in the background continuously, we've all just recently experienced in the past month or so this runaway inflation. So we know that it can happen, and we've sort of forgot about it for a long time because they were sort of printing money and there was no repercussion. But all of a sudden, boom. And we can see this inflation, and it's really starting to bite into everybody's pockets. So everybody's paying attention now. And I think that's just the segue into this commodity super cycle, because I mean, they're the last things that's going to get, they're going to get inflated. And I think that's a great place to be. We've been very pressured. We've been very patient. The Bitcoin got in our way. A lot of other things got in our way prior to waiting for the commodity cycle to cycle around. And I think our patience is going to pay off now. We're here and we've arrived, and yeah, we're going to see big time inflation in that business. Absolutely.
Can you speak? You seem to have some thoughts on the inflation generally. Have you been keeping a track of that? And what's your opinion there?
No, I'm just like everybody else. I take my truck down, my work truck down to the gas station. $100 only puts a half a tank in it now. I mean, holy smokes. You just think, and that's, I mean, that's just going to underpin the cost of everything. I mean, it's just, and the way things are as of today, what's the recent developments as of today's date in the Ukraine, it looks like that oil could go to $3. I mean, a liter, who knows? I mean, it's just doesn't seem to be restrained in any way, right?
I guess I became interested in precious metals because of the global financial crisis in 2008, the money printing, quantitative easing back then piqued my curiosity and made me interested in gold and silver. And then, of course, I guess geopolitical conflict generally has always been, gold has been a safe haven from such events. We see that now. And it seems that, as you mentioned, we've arrived and there's this confluence of factors. So what does that imply for somebody like you in the mining industry who's been, as you said, very patient? What do you think comes next?
What comes next? Well, I mean, there's a tremendous, interest in the Fed to keep the price of gold down. These like the big banks like Morgan. I remember when I don't know what the facts are today. I'm not a chart plotter and all that. But in 2000, when I started, Morgan Stanley was short 2 years total world production gold in 2000. And I imagine that, I don't know if they've increased that position or not, but I mean that in itself is an untenable situation. They have just created so much paper on top of the gold. It just boggles the mind, and they've gotten away with it. So it is very much in their interest to keep the lid on gold, and it has been. And you can see, like, perhaps 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, gold spiked up, and man, the Fed came, we don't know who came in, but someone came in and just hammered it down hard. And that is not a natural market thing whatsoever. It hasn't happened since. It's just trying to demoralize everybody, and it's just not, I think it's going to run out. They're going to lose their ammunition. And it's, I mean, it's right through 1950 as we speak, and the horse could be out of the gate. It may not be, but it doesn't, but it's a pretty good price right now anyways. I mean, all of these mid-tier producers now, they're making money, so, and that in itself, and they're not going to be so reticent to do the mergers and acquisitions because these guys are making money right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how the M&A thing plays out and how the cycle plays out. But we're just in the early days of a big gold super cycle in my mind. I'm not a foreseer, but I've been in the business a long time, and gold can get out of the gate, and it won't affect. The only people it's going to really affect is the merchant banks in the States, Morgan Stanley's and all those guys. It's not going to affect the average person, so it can go, and because it can attract it, or however it's going to go. I mean, there's nothing really stopping it. It doesn't affect the average person. It's just these banks trying to keep it down, and they're going to run out of ammunition soon, and it's going to go. And but that's not the reason we're in the business. The gold is a really good price right now for us. I mean, if you can't build a solid business case on this fundamentals, you're looking for some pretty thin margins. I mean, whatever. It's a good price as we speak, and it's just going to get better. So, those of us who paid attention and kept our eye on the ball, it's going to pay off. I think it's going to pay off in droves. Yeah.
What might change in the mining market generally? Do you think there'll be an increase of exploration? You mentioned the mid-level miners are now profiting. What kind of structural changes might start changing as we move from 1950 gold to higher, assuming we do?
Well, they're not going to find any more unless they start exploring. And, really the juniors at these price levels, the risk reward is not great. The junior market's still been pretty much kept at bay, so until that market until they start capitalizing that market, people start feeling good about investing in these deals because they can make money. I think it's just gonna exasperate the situation myself personally. Not much exploration is going to have. The mid tiers are capable of doing reasonable exploration programs, but the majors aren't. They don't find anything. They're not good explorationists whatsoever, and their track record is horrible. And the amount of capital they burnt, is just outrageous. They're much better off to go, find a junior that's got a half decent outline of a deposit and in a good location, and just grab that as opposed to trying to find that, because they'll never find those things. They're not, and it's not getting. And that's when things were easy. That's when these great big high sulfidation systems were just sticking out of the Andes, and it was for everybody to trip over. Well, it's just gotten more and more difficult now. These things are all getting buried now, and they're harder to find. And the majors are just no good at doing that work. So. It's something's got to break here in the cycle, and that's why it could be the junior cycle, and so I'm not too sure how it's going to play out. I really don't know. I'm just kind of really more focused on our business plan and keeping the company healthy and moving our prospects along, and so far so good, and we're actually making good progress. We've managed. No one expects you to have a big office anymore and all those ridiculous overheads. We've managed to trim all that. And all the money just goes in, basically all goes in the ground. There's some G&A, of course, to run a public company, but more money is going in the ground in the juniors. And I see some better results lately coming out of, now the market's starting to move again post-COVID. And I think, yeah. So we'll get the junior excitement going again. And maybe we'll get some market caps where people get interested back in these things. And then the exploration cycle will really begin. We'll find some more stuff, There's not, the world's getting to be a small place, right? For as far as exploration, it's all been looked at a little bit. There's still plenty of opportunity, mind you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So,
what's a day in the life of a mining executive like Chris? So, what are some of the areas of focus that you keep an eye on? Like you said, you took this recent opportunity to rather quickly, it sounds like, trim what costs you could, which I think is a very reasonable approach to the last 2 years. What other areas are you focused on, do you think, most as president, CEO, and director?
Oh, well, we're just, keeping the balls in the air, it just keeps you busy, really busy. And we've got our little mine, our Alpalta Dorada mine, which is going ahead right now. And it's going to start bearing fruit soon. We can talk about that in a moment. And and our big, we have a great big high sulfidation epithermal type project in the Andes. There's been in southern Peru that there's been $10 million spent on it, and we've just now completed it. We're just about finished the 43-101. We've had 3 different geologists been working on this thing. They've actually been back and forth, and they've been debating it. And we've got a geologic model, and it's really, we've never had that before. No one's really dove into the data like we have recently. And this 43-101 was the real catalyst to get that going. And so we're going to have that come out, and it's going to be cool. It's going to show a high sulfidation model, mineralization model right next to a low sulfidation model. And it's all happening at Nina Bamba. So we're going to have a very high grade silver cap. We think there's 200 million ounces in that thing. That's going to be virtually zero stripping, running about 2 ounces silver per ton average. And then below that, off to the side, well, down slope a little bit, is a big vuggy silica quartz unit, which is part of the chalcedonic cap is part of a low sulfidation system. And right next to it is a high sulfidation that manifests in this vuggy silica, which would have, and it's all part of a big collapse caldera in the big picture. But anyways, that's a very unique geological setting. We're having trouble finding, operating mines or scenarios in the past that match that exact model. But it's very much real. It's very much the porphyry model. It's what we have there. And so the vuggy silica is gold. We nailed it. And 4 of the trenches were sloping down slope. 4 trenches ended up in that unit, 1 or 2, and and a couple of drill holes towed into it. We've got about it's running at around 1.1 grams of gold, and and with very low strip ratio. Part of it's actually just right at surface, and so there's a big long chalcedonic cap that runs for about 1.5 kilometers, and then right just down slope and almost parallel that trend is this vuggy silica unit with virtually very low stripping ratio. And anybody knows the mining, the vuggy silica is what made Yanacocha. Well, that's what got them their 25 million ounces. It's all just prolific through the trend. Anytime you got a block of that, you're in. People are going to pay attention, and we're onto it, and that will make some very low cost mining. There's very low cost mining. It's just drill blast and straight on the leach pad. There's no crushing. It's a very low cost process, and that's something a junior can actually get his hands on and run with, because you don't need a huge feasibility study, and it's a very simple thing. And we're going to pursue that with vigor. We're going to use all of our friends and associates and Peruvian engineers in the business down there. They're very good. They're reasonable cost, and they really know what they're doing. And we don't have to do a full feasibility study, and have a little junior bear those costs of putting that feasibility together. That's a big burden. We can be in production ×2 for the cost of a full-blown feasibility study. So that's our talent. That's my talent. I mean, some people would rather you just sit back and sell it, but we're gonna, of course, everything is for sale. And in a runaway scenario, who knows what could happen. But we are very much keen on putting that thing into production in some small way, and getting the maximum leverage for our shareholders. And prior to that, though, we're working on our Palta Dorada project, which is in the north part of the country in Peru, and it's a different mineralization style. It's a mesothermal vein system in the granites. It's close to the coast. It's there's no community for us to deal with. It's very easy for us to forward that project, and we've just now got we've gone through actually a bit of a high grading campaign. And we're going to put 250 tons on the deck, and then we'll batch that through our partner's mill. We have a partner that earned in on the project, Peruvian Metals. Peruvian Metals has a toll milling facility just down around the corner. It's just a $20 a ton or less ride for the mineral, and it will be shipping down $800 to $1,000 per ton rock, and so it's not even an issue. And so. That is coming very close. We had been prior to this, we've been working very hard all through COVID. We were putting an access tunnel adrift underneath the whole sequence of this mineralization, so we can mine the thing with gravity. But it was just taking. We had a few setbacks. It's a slow going. We're almost there, but we want to show the market what we have. We promised the market we'd get something to the mill more sooner. So we backed up, and we went back in at the top of the structure, and we dropped the guys down a 35-meter shaft, basically a 100-foot deep shaft, they're hoisting out these sacks of high grade, fairly high grade mineral. So, but we'll only do a certain amount of that. That'll give us a pilot, a little bit. That'll give us a good little cash flow bonus. It'll make some good news. People can really see what our target is and why we're doing so much work with our infrastructure and the main access tunnel underneath. But just more reason for a few. Then we'll get back on the main tunnel. It'll only take us a month or so to get it completed and underneath where we want to be, and then we can just start letting gravity work for us, and we'll just milk that thing out. And yeah, and that will make a nice little cash flow for both companies involved, and pay for our G&As, and and all of our in-country expenses, all but the drilling probably. Then we'll just go to the market and say, listen, we're going to raise X amount of dollars, and it's going to be 100% in the ground, not 50% to G&A and all this. It's, so we've, things that it's been a dilutive cycle at 5 when our stock's been suffering at, sort of 5 cents a share, but that's going to come to an end soon. And, mostly insiders and close to friends of ours have been putting away the blocks of stock recently. So it hasn't really changed our ownership package, our structure for the company. Everybody's very convinced that we're really onto something, and they're willing to keep writing checks, right, even till however long it takes. But very soon, anyways, we're just about to get our moment of truth. We're gonna have some great results out of Lateegra coming soon. Will be news release soon. We should have our community relationship, a social package complete soon, very soon, and that's a segue into our drill permit, all in time to get drilling by, the drill cycle is not going to come until this late fall or winter, November or so. December is when the dry season in the mountains is. Right now it's the rainy season, and right now it's their summer. They're coming out of summer, but when they head into the rainy season in our spring, that's their fall, but it gets drier up in the Andes. That's when you go to work. So that's our window to work up there for 6 months. So that's not until October, November-ish. And we'll have our permits in place. We've got the drill in place. We've got the people in place. It's all there. So although it's a little ways down the road, Lateegra will be making news in the meantime, and we've got plenty of work to do. We're spending lots of good money on a geological model. It's really coming together. Geologists will see that and they'll recognize it for what it is, and it will that 43-101 will really bring some eyes on our project, because we haven't had that in the past. We just haven't had the luxury of that, but it's all coming together. So yeah, so we're very excited, super excited. Yeah.
What do you attribute your finding this opportunity to?
Well, just like I said, I used to be a contractor, a mining contractor, and I crossed over, somewhere around the late 90s, 2000. Then I helped Joey Freeze go public with her company Condente in Peru. So that's when I got my initial exposure to Peru. I had been poking around in Bolivia, spent some time, a number of trips to Bolivia, looking at opportunities down there, exploration type things. I was just getting our feet wet. But at the time in 2000, when I was working with Joey Freeze in Peru, AngloGold had a big budget, and they made it past. They had a huge budget. They had $10 million, and we had, not much. And they came through anyways. We knew the authors of that, the operators, a gentleman like Chris Lauder, a very super successful geologist, and has an exploration leader. He's got a real nose for the business. Anyways, they went all through Peru in 2000 in a very big pass, and Nina Bamba came out of that pass, and they put a few holes into it. And I guess it wasn't 2 million ounces sticking out of the Andes. So they packaged it up and immediately optioned it off to Bear Creek. But then AngloGold went on to much greater things. They were in a big rush to make sure they weren't missing any of these 2 and 3 million ounces or 5 million ounce deposits that are there, low hanging fruit. But Nina Bamba was very good. It just wasn't. It was just that next level of target. It just needed more work, and they were in a rush. They were in a big rush because they left Peru in about 2002 and went up to Colombia, and then they staked 6 million hectares of land. The largest exploration program in the world at the time was going on there. You had hundreds and hundreds of expats down there doing the work, and the Colombian government was providing them security. And as they were going through the projects, they were just handing when they were done with the projects, they were just handing the data back to the government to form their regional database. They didn't have one prior. And so, they were really on a big mission. So we knew about Nina Bamba as one of the plums, and we kept our eye on it. And then managed to get our hands on it. I don't know what happened in the later 90s, but sorry, in the later 2000s. But Bear Creek were focused elsewhere. They had a couple of mines they were putting in production. They just didn't put the energy into Nina Bamba at the time that they should have. And we managed to acquire it off them very cheaply, basically for staking. And that's how it got started. We got started with Nina Bamba. In the meantime, Newmont was working away. It's a big collapse caldera. We're on one half of the thing. Newmont is sort of on the other half, or the center part of the caldera, actually, now that we've really studied where they were in the geological picture. And Newmont spent 9 million US at the time there. And then we'd spent by 2012, and we spent about just under $1 million trenching and at Nina Bamba. So that's when 2012, when the music went out, the lights went out everywhere. Every exploration program on Earth stopped or was clipped right down, virtually came to a standstill. Everybody, the majors had overspent, the whole thing just imploded. So long story short, the company sort of went in care and maintenance. It bumbled along for quite a long time. And then and it was being held and controlled by another company, by the principals of another company called Peruvian Metals, because it was the same geologist that owned the initial options, and it was their project to start with. And so it came time for them to sort of bring Rio Silver out of care and maintenance, and that's when they brought me in about 3 years ago. But I'd known about this project for since 2000. So it was literally on our wish list. Maybe we could get AngloGold would just kick that out to us, but of course we weren't up to scale. Bear Creek, the bigger mid-tier companies were lined up for that stuff and paying big money, and so we just kept our eye on it. And then anyways, after we got the Nina Bamba side, right about 2016 or 15 or 16, Newmont made a mistake and dropped the key part of the holding, just by a fluke. And while we were there and we grabbed it. So at that point, we then made a deal with Newmont for the balance of the projects, and in return for all their data, we gave them an NSR and some cash. And then time kept, it was just 2015, 16, 17, 18. These claims these were old claims that Newmont had for a long time, and they were getting into the expensive phase of their tenureship. As longer time goes on, your cost to hold these grounds, unless you work on them, starts climbing as an incentive for people to work on these things. So anyways, irregardless, we managed to roll the claims over. It was quiet during COVID. Didn't have very much, had a little bit of interference, but we managed to deal with that. And we've got the claims 0 timed in our name, own them outright with no royalty. So that's what we managed to accomplish during COVID, which is actually a big thing, and got our holding costs way down. So yeah, and here we are. So we're just putting the hammer down now. We got a drill stashed in Peru. It's ready to go, completely utterly ready to go. I've got a driller sitting there available for that project, so we'll be very fast to operate once we get our permit. But that, like I say, that's going to happen in the coming months. But we really can't start to do anything at Nina Bamba until sort of October, November-ish. So it's just going to dovetail well in with the work season. Once you're up and running in the Andes, you can probably go year round more, but just for a grassroots project or a first run, you don't have any proper roads and infrastructure, and then the mud and the rain. But once you can get some of that infrastructure in place, you can continue on and carry on year round up there. It's not impossible, but you just can't do, early, not grassroots, but just, yeah, there's been no work done. There's been no real surface work done on this project, or no access, very little. Access is not bad, but it's mud and it rains. So, once we get started there, we'll probably never stop. But getting started will take a little bit of, that's why we got to wait for the dry season. Yeah. So, we've known about this for a long time. I've followed Rio Silver. I actually tried to buy this project off Rio Silver when I was involved with other companies. I knew about it all along. And then they just kind of said to me, Chris, well, why don't you just come along and run the company? And I said, you know what? That's a hell of a good idea. And so I bellied up, and I bought my cash position in my stock. It's all been paid for on the on the market, in market context, and I believe in this thing like crazy. And this latest 43-101 that we've done, this report, and having all these guys actually we've had all this data and mountains of data, but have these guys actually really noodle this thing out and come up with a real solid model that other geologists and people can see and get their head around is really fantastic. And it just, this project is probably the best thing that's being forwarded in this market. And I'm not tooting my own horn. It's just that special. And there's been a lot of misstarts, and guys are raised a lot of capital. It's gone down to Peru on projects that are not necessarily that stellar. And I don't want to poo-poo on anybody in the industry, but we think we've got something special, and it's going to stand out. And once it's the 43-101 will be the catalyst for that. And then once we get our drill program, people will really can start lining up the dots, and that's we're getting there. That's what we wake up every morning. That's what we're trying to do, get to that goal line, yeah. So we've just finished more recently, just like this last week, we just finished stuffing a container, a sea container. It's going to leave Vancouver, and it's going to go right down to Peru, and it's completely stuffed full of underground drilling equipment for Pelta Dorada. Specialized, that's equipment. So that's where you drill a core drilling, but from underground, not from surface. Because we could surface drill that, but we're going to have to sit back and drill some great big long holes for a short. It's a vein style mine. It's a vein, so you're going to have a huge cost in this hole just to get this narrow intercept. And we can do that from underground much cheaper, because we just put in drill. Once we got our main drive, where it's already in now, that part, we just put in some drill stations off to one side, and we can drill from underground and just drill much shorter holes much more cheaply, and it doesn't need any special permitting. So that's that. And the next bit of news coming up too, in the next quarter, we're going to have a full-blown mining permit for Pelta Dorada. I mean, that's a full-on permit. We've managed to nurse that thing along through the small mines regime, and that's how we managed to function so far. And we have some very, very smart people in Peru, and but the whole thing is going to parlay into a full-blown mining permit this year. And that's significant. I mean, that's not an easy, anybody who's done this kind of work down there will really appreciate the effort that takes to get that done. And that's just a start for us. We've got some great stuff going on. So that's our platform, really, Justin. Yeah, we think the time is right. We've been looking at this for a very long time,
How long?
Yeah.
How long this project, this small mine in particular? Have you been looking at this?
What we're working on? No, well, it was being worked. We knew about it because we have our partners. Peruvian Metals has a custom toll milling facility up just south of Trujillo, which is the north part of the country. And they were friends of the owner. They knew that. I mean, they get to see a lot of people, coming down to there looking to mill their ore, because they see a lot of guys. And the owner of this mine, we knew him for a long, a colorful guy, hardworking guy, very successful Peruvian. He's got 2 girls in university in the States. I mean, he comes from a small town. This guy's very successful, very hardworking guy. But he wanted $2 million for his project, so we sort of said, okay, well, whatever. But he came along, and he was in a bit of a pinch. I think it was a little over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and about 2 years ago. Anyways, he came up to us. He's working on another project. He needed a quick cash advance. He was doing a small heap leach thing there, and he needed some cash to get his leach pads finished and that. And I'm sure he had to pay for his tuition for his girls in the States, because he said, give me $250,000 on the barrelhead, and it's yours, cash. So, I mean, that's the kind of deal the Peruvians like. They like them very simple. There's no complicated option. Cash, you get the deal. So it goes in. So we managed to put up. We actually made a deal with him made 2 payments out of it. And we put the whole thing goes into a central registry. He puts the deal up. We made our payment. I canvassed around my friends and family and everybody I knew, and to come up with the balance with the money, and we did it, and it was ours. That's a typical Peruvian deal. You just put your cash on the table, and then away you go. And so he had been sort of high grading and monkeying around. There's been sort of artisanal works, here and there. They started this shaft. We're actually into his shaft right now, bringing the high grade up to the very top of the project. And it's something we wanted to avoid doing, because it's hard work. Those guys got to hoist those bags 100 feet up. It's just a lot of work. Well, there's a hoist in there, but it's just a lot of work. It's slow and. So we're doing it now anyways, irregardless, just to generate a little bit of cash, but and generate some news and that. But our main access tunnel is continuing underneath. They still got a crew working that steadily, and we're just on one shift right now. But we'll get 2 shifts on that soon. But very soon that whole thing will be in play, and then people will see what we've done there. You know, and it's you know, and that's going to launch us into almost sort of a mid-tier, well, doing a mid-tier company soon. You know, that thing is going to revolve as we develop it. We'll get more and more working headings. We'll get more draw points. We'll increase the tonnage as we go. We can site our own mill there on the property, actually right there. It's a good spot. It's not too far off the Pan American Highway. There's no hills in the way. It's good access. It would be a good place to spot a mill in the future. You know, there's very little issues. It's in the desert. There's very little flora and fauna. You know, you're not going to bother anybody. Yeah, it'll be a nice little project. Employ a bunch of people there, and that's what Peruvians like. They're very mining centric, you know, and there's a lot of people make their livings on mining in Peru, like a lot. So it just fits right in with their whole. It just fits in with the whole, you know, national theme, and we're just in there. And we don't have. We're mostly Peruvian down there. We got a couple Canadian geologists down there and a Canadian driller. And the rest is all Peruvian. The whole, we do it all with Peruvian engineers as much as we can, or we do it all with Peruvian engineers, and all the talent available in-house there locally. And our people are our people that we've been working with in Peru. We've been working with these people for over 20 years, and we know that we've been working together for a long time on other projects. It's a pretty close little crew we have, and it works well. So COVID didn't really bother us, except for the access issues and all those kind of things, you know. But as far as a corporately, no, we just kept marching forward, right? So
small mine. You mentioned you got a small mine. You got a full mine permit, and part of that, I think,
that's for a pelted rata, which is why I keep calling it a small mine, because it's not a huge thing right now. But it can be. It could. It's a mesothermal vein system, and those things run deep, 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 and they're very prominent. They're like the big mines in Manitoba. You know, they go forever. And yeah, so it could get a life of its own, you know. But with that style of mineralization, it's very hard to get resources blocked out ahead of you, because you got to drill these long holes. But now with this underground mining equipment, the drilling equipment, it's going to arrive down there in about a month from now, just under a month. Then we can start actually poking some holes and seeing what's underneath this thing. You know, we know we've got a fair bit of tonnage above us, you know, millions and millions of dollars worth of tons above us, but the big ticket could be below us and parallel, perhaps. There could be a parallel structure. We'll never know. So we'll find that out. You know, that'll be work that'll be going on, you know, our late spring or early summer, you know, in North America. And we'll be doing that drill work, and that'll tell a different story. So that thing could have a life of its own, and it can be just a separate, you know, sort of another major market sort of centerpiece. But anyways, it's but we just call it our little commercial venture, because we know it's going to generate some cash. We got the mill sitting there, you know, and although it hasn't got any feasibility, you know, we can't promote it very much, because we haven't done the work to back up our you know, our stuff, but we will soon. But we know enough about the project. We've seen what the previous operators have done. It's been opened up and potholed by the artisanal miners have been poking at it, but nobody's really had to go at it. Like, nobody's developed it. And so I mean, it's virtually a virgin property, essentially, as far as the ore body's all intact. You go to Mexico and these things are all carved out. I mean, I've seen dozens and dozens of these things where they're just, you know, they're gone. And maybe the potential is, you know, down below or something, but, you know, they really scrape them out pretty hard. So, yeah, so it's a great project, and it's going to have a life of its own. We only own half of it. Our partners are the other 50% now. They've earned in their full 50%, and we're just about to rock and roll there. It's coming, you know.
Why mine and not sell? You mentioned that a lot of people they think that it's probably an easy flip. You obviously believe in this mine, and you say that it's unique. So I'm curious, why mine, not sell?
That'll be our Nina Bomba, which is the big one. Well, yeah, that's a fundamental for most juniors. Most of these junior companies are really solely exploration focused. They're populated by geologists, and that their operations aren't really their expertise. Their expertise is finding these things, and that's typically how it goes. and they don't really have any aspirations to run them anyways. My background has been, I've been a contract miner, since I was a knee high to a grasshopper. I went up, I lived up in I moved to the Yukon when I was 16 years old back in the early 70s. And I just learned, I figured it out. And I became a contractor. We had a big road building business, and we did a lot of work for the mines. Built a lot of tailings ponds and did bulk ore hauling. And I did all the work for BYG back in the day in the Yukon. They forgot to pay us the last 1.6 million. So that's when I decided I was going to learn this business better. But yeah, so but maybe not suited for most companies. We want to. I'm not too. Who really knows? I mean, if we get a big takeover bid, and it's going to make our shareholders rich, there's going to be a lot of opposition to us not doing that. But I mean, everything's up, and up for grabs. But we want to. I'd like to. There's the best value is in the mining and owning these things and building this thing out. We can build up a huge market cap on this thing. So anybody that's involved in our stock at this point in time, is going to be getting dividends in the future and making big money on what was probably just a bit of they took a bit of a flyer. They threw 20 grand at it or whatever. Could become something very significant. When I was a younger man, I had shares in Arequipa Resources by Catherine McLeod. And Arequipa Resources in Peru is one of our models, our high sulfidation model type thing. It's owned by Barrick now, and it's one of Barrick's big producers in Peru. But I knew the people that actually discovered that mine, and that was the model I had. But prior to Catherine McLeod, I didn't know what I had. I bought the stock at 20 cents and sold it at 80 cents and thought, oh my God, I just had the market win, and the thing went to $30. So if I could have wrote it from 20 cents to $30, it would have been pretty phenomenal. But most people don't do that. But that's the sort of thing. So now we've got the project, we've got the goods. I know what these guys have worked on in the past. And Arequipa was involved in they did a lot of work on some other stuff prior to this Purina that wasn't successful, but they got on the Purina, and that just made that company kapow and made everybody that was holding that stock wealthy. The wealth generation was phenomenal. And that's all possible. That's why you buy these junior mining companies. We don't want to, they're expensive to run, these public companies, but the wealth generation that can happen upon discovery is jaw dropping. And that's where we're set. We're right there. We've been working more or less all of our careers to be right here and right now. And finding these projects, there's none other like it. You can't find these things in the Andes, no matter what. They're all spoken for. And 1 out of 2 of these things becomes a mine. And this one's already had 10 million spent on it, which more than most. So I mean, it's leaning to become towards the mining side than not. I mean, I shouldn't say, I got to be careful what I say, but there's going to be a mine on this property. So that's without doubt. And we've had plenty of people looking at it and wanting to give us, trying to lowball us and get the asset, but no. And it's because we're a little junior. They think we're weak, we can't do it, but we're going to do it. We're good at what we do. So we're close, and we're really close.
Excellent. You mentioned in 2012 that the mining industry essentially shut down. Can you take us back to that time and kind of talk us through the series of events?
That was a dark time because I could see it coming, and it was just like there's nothing you can do, right? Yeah, there was just everybody was overexpended. I mean, Kinross had just blew their brains out and spent all these companies were super overextended and spent, hundreds of millions of dollars on stuff that we don't know what, they wrote, it all got written off, 3 or 4 years later in their books. And they were all just feeling invincible in 2012, 2011, 2010, leading up to 2012. And there was some big deals went down, big M&A stock activity and all that. And it just supernovaed, right? And, so it just went quiet. Yeah.
Okay, I got a lot of questions. I kind of want to get into the details and tell us about just how dark it got, but maybe I'll ask this question first.
Well, I don't even want to go back there. It's kind of depressing because my net worth was cut right down to about 20% of what it was. Because I was long and everything, and I'm not really a seller, and probably should have whatever. But when you're an insider on these things, you just can't be selling stock. Everybody's gonna say, "What the hell? You got all your friends loaded up in the thing." You just can't bail out on them. So it's a difficult situation. So you sort of got to go down with a ship. And it was kind of not a great time for us,
How do these majors, I mean, okay, there's a couple things. How do they get to a point where they're overextending themselves so much? How do they not have analysts here that are able to like kind of temper that? It's almost as if I've seen, in small businesses, people overextend themselves, they over leverage themselves. I was at the retail level back then. And the idea at the retail shop was we were going to be like this nationwide coin shop with locations in all the cities in certain states across the union. And we were going to be making hands over fists, but that turned into zero shops relatively quickly. So that's a small business, right? Then you've got, even on the Bitcoin side of things, when I worked in Bitcoin, I've seen during these manias, a company will go from 5 employees to 50 employees in a couple months, and then it's 0 employees very quickly. Now, how are these majors not analyzing the situation and perhaps being a little bit more, I guess, even tempered?
Oh, it was just, I mean, it was just a thing. It was the state of the industry at that time. And these guys were all stepping up and making great big bids. We're all kind of going, whoa. And then all of a sudden there'd be another acquisition. We're going, whoa. And these guys were paying big bucks. It was just kind of the money, I guess, was flowing, pretty well. The markets were on their side. And man, and they really overextended themselves. And I mean, to the point where it could have put many of them in jeopardy. Very close, very, very close. They spent billions. They'd overspent by billions, not millions, billions, pretty much across the board everywhere. And they all overextended themselves. Then I guess commodities pulled back a little bit, and I don't know what I mean, half those things didn't turn out as they thought they would. So I mean, it was just why the market rolled over. I mean, haven't really thought about it. I guess what really happened. I guess at that point too, maybe the Bitcoin, a few other things go, well, that was prior to Bitcoin, I guess, or maybe not. I guess maybe the Bitcoin got in the space and all the marijuana stocks, those, that was a big rage, right? That took a lot of our capital. So everybody bailed their mining stocks and started buying marijuana stocks.
The stock market too, generally though, the stock market, I mean, from 2008, 2009, all of a sudden it's already several years into a big decade-long bull market.
Yeah.
And which I think is ongoing still technically.
Well, it technically is. It just is, but it just, it just pulled back. And a lot of these other things got in the way of this, like all the marijuana business got in our way, and now the Bitcoin, and right after that with the Bitcoin, but they're all done. And it's I don't know what else they can inflate with all this money printing, especially after COVID. It was sort of like the supernova on top of the storm, and it's just going to manifest. It's just going to come our way, So that's the way I see it. I think we're it.
How do you avoid, suffering through as a business through a similar period? Like we said, we started this, so we'll kind of bring this to a close here with what we started, a super cycle, commodity super cycle, right? That theoretically, hopefully ends, I suppose. Now, how does a junior miner or a miner like kind of navigate those waters, or a business owner, even generally? We can make it a little more general discussion too.
Well, junior companies aren't, they're pretty opportunistic. So they're not necessarily planning for the long time. They're planning for this market cycle that they're in, right? So those guys just got to be quick on their feet, because when it goes no bid, there's no bid. I mean, just forget it, right? So any really astute operators manage to keep their corporate, self intact, just to weather the storm. But some didn't. Many didn't. So those assets all come loose again. That's how come these mines are very seldom, are put into production on the first go around. Is usually, if you get a property, a good exploration property, and it's had a major work on it for, that's a blessing, because these things don't happen in one mining cycle. It takes several mining cycles for these mines to get developed. And so if you've had a major work on your project in the past, people say, well, what was wrong with the project? Well, nothing was wrong with the project. The markets, there was something else happened. It was a market thing, or, it was something other than that wasn't the project or the geology, or no, the geology is still intact. And the potential is still intact. It's just the market went away, and they had to pull in their horns and put their focus elsewhere. So that's why these things take several mining cycles to get into production. So if you've had a major company working on your mine in the past, that's considered a blessing in our business, not a poo-poo, you know. So because these things take a long time, and they don't just go straight forward, you know. It's not the main projects. It doesn't get full attention, and then you know, all sorts of things get in the way, and you get these, you know, these big companies, the middle managers, they don't always make the best decisions in the field. You know, they just, you know, they do some strange things. And there's, you know, so they're usually overfunded, and they too much money, and they waste it, and instead of, you know, pulling their horns in and really being more focused what they're doing, I don't know, and then the budget's blown and they're done, and then they're gone, and the project sort of gets discarded or put off to one side, and then the mining companies changes management, and new management comes in, doesn't recognize what the old management's done, and they just toss it out. You see this happen all the time. I mean, this is kind of the way, this is just the way the mining cycle is. So that's the opportunity for juniors, because you're quick on your feet. You know, these things, all these pieces, you can assemble the pieces fairly quickly, and that's why they become available, because it's not a cohesive, linear process developing a mine. No, it's just, it goes in market cycles, and you know, and personal and individual personalities get involved, and all sorts of things that affect the way these things get developed, right? So it's an interesting business, really. It really is. Yeah.
I guess, can you speak to budgeting generally? You mentioned specifically that some people will raise a lot of money, companies will raise a lot of money and just not really manage it so well. Can you and you mentioned we took the opportunity of COVID to cut costs as well. Can you talk about the importance of that when in running a business?
Well, we all know, we don't want to talk about it much, but these little junior companies can become lifestyle companies for the operators, right? And you know, so you know, they want to raise a bunch of money and spend half of it on G&A. Well, you know, anyhow, but now that the stock price is right down low, that just cuts that opportunity just about out. And people got to be really focused and really careful how they utilize their capital, you know, super careful. And otherwise you're going to end up with, you know, a blown out, shareholder base. You know, you're going to have hundreds of millions of shares, and they don't have a real project. And then, well, that's it. Those people have invested in that thing. They're going to roll the company back, and those people are going to get, you know, losing money or whatever, or have to wait. I mean, they may not necessarily lose, but they're going to have to wait an awful long time for that thing to cycle around where they get back to where they were, you know. So, yeah, I don't know.
I've heard theories that silver is the most undervalued commodity on the planet, to that it's actually been demonetized and is now an industrial metal only. Where do you stand?
Well, it's an industrial metal for sure, but it's a pretty special one. And it's been money in the past. It's been monetized and been used as monetized as money in the past. I mean, silver is a pretty remarkable element. And it can, you know, the price of silver can double, and it won't really affect its end uses, like for solar, solar power and all that, because they become much more efficient now. There's actually a much smaller silver component in these solar panels now than there ever used to be. So the price of the silver can go up, and it's not going to really affect the product. So it can. So they, you know, and that's because it's not going to be restrained really in too much. So silver can go, but it's a funny one. It always lags behind the gold, and you know, it's lots of people have tried and front run that market. You know, Warren Buffett et al. You know, cost him big time when he got on the wrong side of that. But yeah, Warren Buffett thought he was, you know, hedging the silver market, and then he got on the wrong side of it, and he had to sell his whole holdings. Became the first ETF. It was, they had enough silver in one pile to form the ETF. So but he had to bail out of it because he guessed wrong. So it's just, you know what, it's not an easy thing, right? But yeah, so that's the game we're in.
You mentioned silver is a special metal. Just briefly, as we come to a close here, like
Sure.
Tell us, what do you expect in the next in the coming months and years and decade for silver?
Well, its antiviral properties are phenomenal. You know, silver is mostly a byproduct of base metal production. There's very few standalone silver mines, and our Nina Bomba might in fact become one, but those are kind of a rare bird. It's usually a byproduct of metal, byproduct of copper or lead zinc operations, and so they tend to focus on selling their base metals, and they just throw the silver out. They just sell it into the market, boom. But they're not marketing it. They just blow it out, into the market. So it's kind of been unloved in that way, and that's why and because it's a very small component of many big mines, because it's a smaller component of what they're doing. They just chuck it out, right? They just so they're not really focused on marketing it. But so that's been part of the reason why it's sort of been left in the doldrums. But I don't know. I mean, it's like everything else. There's no stockpile left in the world. There used to be for a long time, but there's none. I mean, its uses are in antiviral. It's industrial uses and whatnot are becoming more and more so every day, prevalent every day. And so it's going to have a day in the sun. We've seen it in the past, and I think it's got to have a good chance of. It's not going to ever be worth any less. You can't mine it for it's not going to be worth less. There's just no way. You can't even barely produce it for what it's as right now. Many mines would struggle at these prices unless you got something special. So it's going to come. It's going to come.
Anything else people need to know about Rio Silver?
It's a great little company. Have a look at it right now while it's cheap. I don't know. I'm a promoter, so I got to say those things. But I think I really believe it's where people got to spend their time. I have got a number of Americans that are looking at, have bellied up and like it. People are looking around. They look at what's out there right now, and they really appreciate what we've got. And our upcoming 43-101 report, going to be published very soon, in the next couple of weeks, is going to, it's going to demonstrate that out for us. So that'll show the upside.
We've had the honor and privilege of sitting down today with Chris Verrico. He's the president, CEO, and director of Rio Silver, which you can find at riosilverinc.com. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today.
Awesome, Justin. Thank you. It's been a pleasure being with you, bud.
Yeah. Pleasure's all mine. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a great day.